This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday, April 29th. I'm Ephraim Graham. We're going to begin this half hour with news from the Middle East. The U.S. blockade is crippling Iran's economy. President Donald Trump is determined to continue blocking oil shipments until Iran is ready to make a deal over its nuclear program. In Lebanon, Israel is stepping up strikes on Hezbollah to remove the Iranian-backed terrorist group. CBN Middle East correspondent Paul Petit brings us the story. He's reporting from Jerusalem.
Iran is in a state of collapse and wants us to open the Hormuz Strait as soon as possible, according to this Truth Social post by President Trump. The Wall Street Journal reports that Trump instructed aides to prepare for an extended blockade of Iran to step up economic pressure, forcing the country to find new ways to store its oil and avoid a crippling production shutdown.
The blockade is not a blockade against shipping. It's a blockade against Iranian shipping because they cannot be the sole beneficiaries of an illegal, unlawful, and unjustified system of tolling and control in the Straits.
In a post on X, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent writes, Iran's creaking oil industry is starting to shut in production thanks to the U.S. blockade. Pumping will soon collapse. Gasoline shortages in Iran next. The U.S. naval blockade appears to be working. Iran International reports rising fears of new protests, like it saw in January, driven by a deepening economic crisis, with inflation, government crackdowns, and oil disruptions fueling public anger. To the global oil markets, the United Arab Emirates announces it's moving to withdraw from OPEC May 1st. The move could weaken OPEC's control over oil prices and further roil markets already strained by the Iran conflict.
The UAE is making this decision now as global markets are unsettled, and as it moves into the future, it will be setting its own path and potentially butting up against the OPEC that it once belonged to.
In Lebanon, the Israeli Defense Forces are stepping up operations, citing Hezbollah's ceasefire violations. Israel is targeting the terror group's drones and large tunnel networks and has ordered evacuations of 16 southern villages as strikes intensify.
In Lebanon, there are monumental achievements: the elimination of the rocket array that threatened the entire country, the creation of a security zone that prevents the possibility of an invasion into northern Israel. We have freedom of action to thwart immediate and emerging threats. This is an agreement we made with the United States and also with the Lebanese government.
CNN reports that Iran is expected to submit a new proposal this week. In a new Truth Social post by Trump that's sure to raise some eyebrows, he wrote, Iran can't get their act together. They don't know how to sign a non-nuclear deal. They better get smart soon.
Paul Petit joins us now to continue our coverage. So, Paul, let's talk more about the Strait of Hormuz and the impact of the U.S. naval blockade. How deep is Iran suffering as a result of all this?
Yeah, from right now, Iran is struggling with a massive glut of unsold oil, as you just heard, is forcing it to store crude in overflow facilities, and that's simply, bad for business. The blockade is cutting off key export routes through the Strait of Hormuz, and that severely limits Iran's primary source of revenue. Now, remember here, oil money accounts for nearly half of Iran's total fiscal budget and 60% of Iran's total export revenue. That's a lot of money. Also, you have to think shipping and insurance costs have skyrocketed, making what little export Iran can manage far less profitable here. Ephraim?
The possibility of an extension to the naval blockade makes it appear like President Donald Trump is seeing that as a more impactful solution to peace talks with Iran than revamping combat operations. What are you hearing?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting right now, Ephraim. Trump is signaling a preference for economic and naval pressure over large-scale military escalation. Of course, you wouldn't know that by seeing the Truth Social post he just put at the end of my story, but there's simply a lot less risk than another full-on invasion of Iran. Now, officials view the blockade as a way to force Iran back to negotiations without triggering a broader regional war and risking more American lives. So, extending the blockade keeps Iran economically isolated, and as I mentioned earlier, while maintaining military leverage here. There's also a growing belief that financial strangulation may achieve concessions faster than direct combat. So we'll have to see if Iran submits another peace proposal, more to Trump's liking, in the coming days here. Now, on the flip side in all this, some analysts warn prolonged blockades could provoke retaliation or escalation in the Gulf areas.
As you mentioned in your story, the UAE plans to leave OPEC. What does this mean to the oil industry and oil prices?
Yeah, that's a huge move here. The end game with OPEC is that the ability to control global oil prices. With the UAE exiting, well, that could impact the group's ability to do just that. So that could lead to increased production competition as the UAE pursues its own output strategy here. And like in any business, increased competition often spells what? Lower prices. So oil prices could face downward pressure if the UAE boosts production independently. So in the short term, though, markets may also see some more volatility as OPEC's cohesion fractures. But in the long term here, the move may encourage other members to reconsider their own participation in the cartel, which could then trigger even further competition, which may end up possibly in lower oil prices. Alfred?
So a ceasefire is in place between Israel and Hezbollah, yet fighting goes on. What has Israel and Lebanon discussed thus far, and how does this impact northern Israel?
Yes, you could certainly call it a very fragile ceasefire at this point, Ephraim. Israel and Lebanon have discussed terms to reduce cross-border fire and pull back forces from the front line. And this is with the okay from Lebanon, as Netanyahu alluded to. Now, talks include enforcement mechanisms, the role of international mediators to monitor the truths. Now, of course, the problem here is Hezbollah, right? And Lebanon's ongoing inability to eliminate the terrorist group that's long been funded by Iran. What's happening? Well, Hezbollah continues intermittent attacks in northern Israel, and that undermines the stability despite the agreements that are in place. So that forces Israel, what? To strike back, which is what it's doing right now. But that means despite Israel's success on the battlefield, northern Israel remains highly volatile, with residents there displaced and communities undergoing threats constantly. So that uncertainty here is delaying any large-scale return of evacuees and economic recovery in that region, which is never good. Never.
What is the tone of Jews and Israelis in Israel right now, particularly in the northern area where the fighting is still going on?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Many Jewish Israelis there expressed strong support for continued military action against Hezbollah despite the ceasefire. Residents in northern communities live near a war zone and feel its effects pretty much every day. So they're frustrated, saying that the truce does not provide real security because Hezbollah just keeps on firing. In fact, an Israeli contractor working in southern Lebanon was killed just this week when he was hit by a Hezbollah drone while working on an excavator there. And so local officials warned that civilians feel like sitting ducks there with ongoing threats just across the border because there is a widespread sense of distrust toward the ceasefire, combined with, of course, fatigue from the prolonged conflict. And the mayor from Kiryat Shimona, which sits right next to the Lebanon border, in fact, I visited there just a couple of weeks ago, he says that his residents are fed up with the ceasefire arrangement where the ceasing of fire actually never really happens. And that's the bottom line in northern Israel right now, Ephraim.
All right, Paul, thank you so much. We appreciate it. I want to turn now to some other news. Severe weather continues in parts of the United States. Thunderstorms tore through parts of Texas. Powerful winds and debris caused damage to buildings and ripped roofs of homes. At least 2 people are in the hospital from injuries, and some families are displaced. This is just the latest in extreme weather. Days ago, in northern Texas, at least 2 people died, and many families were uprooted due to a tornado. As the national debt approaches $40 trillion, the U.S. government seems caught in what some call a debt-driven doom loop. While the economy seems healthy, experts warn the situation could turn bad very quickly. Aldale Hurd is going to explain why.
30 NFL stadiums filled to the top with stacks of $100 bills. That still wouldn't be enough to hold the $39 trillion national debt. For that, you would need 7 more stadiums full of $100 bills. To make matters worse, the Penn-Wharton budget model warns the national debt is actually closer to $100 trillion. Half of each dollar the government borrows now goes to pay interest on the debt, close to $1 trillion per year.
As government spending keeps going up, the federal debt is growing faster than ever. But it seems few in Washington have the political courage to do anything about it.
This institution has failed. We have failed our country. We have jeopardized our economy, our security, our leadership in the world, and worst of all, we have compromised on our children's future.
And yet what politicians in Washington would be willing to essentially sabotage their re-election chances by voting to rein in the major drivers of the debt: Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid?
These three programs are the entire budget problem, and unless we address them, it's pretty much impossible to balance the budget or achieve some level of fiscal sustainability.
Meanwhile, the Congressional Budget Office warns the federal debt is on track to hit $150 trillion within 30 years, equivalent to more than $1 million per household. Policy analyst Dominic Lett at the Cato Institute says delaying entitlement cuts will only make it more painful.
We can make relatively small, if painful, adjustments now, but if we delay them, the adjustments will need to be much larger.
We've run some numbers ourselves. You need several trillion in cuts or additional taxes in order to get to a sustainable measure.
And in light of recent government fraud scandals, Daniel Bunn, president and CEO of the Tax Foundation, says to those who think a large part of the federal debt is fraud, it's not.
Yes, it's something meaningful, but it's not something that's going to save so much that you're going to change the overall trajectory of the debt.
Those who don't believe the debt is a problem point out the world keeps financing it through the purchase of U.S. Treasury notes. However, former Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson warned a few days ago that the national debt could lead to a vicious bond market crash, and the IMF is now calling the U.S. debt problem a global risk. Some experts believe the answer is letting an unelected bipartisan commission make the necessary spending cuts. Congress, though, would still have to vote on those recommendations, and it doesn't look like U.S. lawmakers will do anything until serious damage hits the U.S. economy. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Coming up, well-known Democrat and Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz shares why he is changing parties. He's joining the Republican Party. Stay with us. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. When we come back, we'll tell you why. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Famed Harvard law professor and lifelong Democrat Alan Dershowitz recently announcing he is switching to the Republican Party. He blames the shift on the Democrats' growing anti-Israel and, at times, anti-Semitic tone. He tells CBN News' chief political analyst David Brody his former party is headed for the waste bin of history.
When an influential American liberal and prominent legal mind walks away from the Democrat Party, it will make waves. And Alan Dershowitz has done exactly that. A Democrat since age 14, the 87-year-old now says what drove him away.
I can't be associated with a party that's kind of leading the anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, morphing into anti-Semitic campaigns.
Dershowitz tells CBN News the breaking point has been building and really accelerated after the 2024 DNC convention, where he says the party provided a platform to anti-Israel voices, which led to hateful rhetoric in this year's key Senate races. The embrace of controversial figures like Hassan Piker has only made things worse.
And therefore, I would vote for Hamas over Israel every single time.
I got banned completely from the New York Times, but now they're giving a platform to Hassan Piker because he's so close to Democrats. Rahm Emanuel, Bernie Sanders, all these people are now getting in bed with a Nazi, a real Nazi. I mean, not just a pseudo-Nazi, but somebody who might as well be wearing a swastika.
Dershowitz is turning that frustration into action, saying in addition to leaving the party, he's actively working against it.
I decided I had to devote all my energy to making sure the Democrats do not control the House, do not control the Senate, do not control the presidency, because that would all be bad for America, for Israel, for peace.
As a Jew, he's also sick and tired of anti-Semitic tropes, like the accusations Israel somehow pulls the strings to influence President Trump in making decisions with Iran and the broader Middle East.
First of all, why would Trump ever, from a political point of view, favor Israel? Favoring Israel doesn't get you votes these days. Certainly it doesn't get you crossover votes. What Trump is doing is based on principle, not politics. And he's certainly not being pushed around by Netanyahu. Any claim that Israel is pulling the strings or Israel is making the decisions for Trump is both stupid, ignorant, and bigoted.
For Dershowitz, though, this goes beyond politics. It's become personal. That's because the cost of speaking out has led to losing relationships and being shut out of institutions that once regularly welcomed him. He says temples and Jewish organizations won't even host him. Bookstores have stopped carrying his books. And here's where it gets interesting. Alan, do you think there are other prominent Democrats that you know of that privately feel how you feel but aren't saying anything publicly?
Oh, I know that for a fact. In fact, I probably got 20 phone calls and emails just when I wrote my op-ed for the Wall Street Journal saying, "You speak for me, thank you for saying it," but they don't want to say it. First of all, they're terrified about alienating their family members.
And it doesn't stop there. He believes the Democrats' shift against Israel and a move towards anti-Semitism could mean disaster for the party. How do you think history is going to judge the Democrat Party on this when it comes to Israel?
Horribly. The Democratic Party is today in the early stages of what have developed into really anti-Semitic parties like Britain's Labour Party early on and the Spanish Left Party.
Dershowitz believes this is a defining moment, not just for the party, but for America.
When you turn against Israel today, you're turning against America tomorrow. And that's been proved over time. And you're turning against Western values, Judeo-Christian values, and values of decency. So I think the Democratic Party is going into the waste bin of history.
And now Alan Dershowitz is writing a new chapter in his storied career. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Country music singer and songwriter Whey Jennings is hot, honest, open, and transparent, especially when it comes to his personal battles. Jennings is now following in the footsteps of his musical grandfather with a voice all his own in a project called Baptized by Fire.
I was headed down a path of destruction with a pain that I just couldn't kill.
So in terms of your music catalog, we go from Gypsy Soul to Jekyll and Hyde and now Baptized by Fire.
Yeah.
Why a gospel album?
It's a country album with gospel overtones.
And the hope that nothing could feel.
It's probably the most vulnerable I've ever been, but you know, that's the way God likes us sometimes, I guess, because that's where I'm at today. I was led here, and I just hope everybody loves the album, man.
Love what I've heard. Tell me, why do you say this is the most vulnerable?
Because it's different than anything I've ever done. You know, in my life, I've made myself pretty comfortable on stage doing like country rock and blues, you know, and being the life of the party. And you know, everybody enjoys the good time at the shows, but everybody also comes and talks to me after the show at my merch booth and lets me know that they heard me. You know, I mean, when they hear me, it means the world to me.
But I know Jesus was with me, even in my darkest hour.
I've heard you say that you didn't know that there was a light at the end of the tunnel and you weren't looking for one. Tell me about that time in your life. What was going on?
Well, you know, I started partying at a really young age, you know. Drugs and alcohol was like just part of me, you know. That along with smoking cigarettes and weed. And it was just, I thought that was who I was going to be my whole life, you know. But over time, it led me away from Jesus. It led me away from God and any kind of moral structure at all, you know what I mean? So a lot of the things I would do, I had no problem with doing them because I didn't think there was any consequence for them. I've met a woman that, you know, struck a different chord with me, you know what I mean? And I ended up cheating on her. And she in return cheated on me. And then I felt like I'd hit my rock bottom at that point, you know. And I went I went to rehab thinking that she was never coming back, and they gave me two choices. They said, you can go through a regular rehab or you can go through this spiritual course we've got. And so I went to church every day for 28 days, and I went through my meetings and all that stuff, and I put my best foot forward, and I wanted to just be a better me for whoever was going to be left in my life, you know what I mean?
I think of the day that's before me and the time I'll let slip away.
When I got out, she came and picked me up, and we gave our life to God, man, and we started living right when we got married. We have had 2 children together since then. We have 7 altogether, and life is, the Lord gave me a good home, a good family, and my quiver is full.
I had to be baptized by fire in order to truly be saved.
Tell me about the title track for this new album, Baptized by Fire.
Baptized by Fire. Well, I was writing in Nashville. I did back to my childhood in it, because whenever I was young, my mama always had an open Bible in the house. So I've always been in Scripture my whole life, but just with a different mindset. And that's something I've learned today, is that the Bible meets you where you are. You can read it when you're young and get one thing out of it, and you can read the same Bible over again when you're older and find a completely different message. You know, it's been a blessing getting into Scripture. And what my pastor back home says is, you got to stay tethered to Scripture, or you'll drift away from it. So me and my wife have been trying to stay tethered to it. We're doing this 1-year Bible, and you know, I feel like Baptized by Fire is my story up until now, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what my future story would be.
I had to be baptized by fire in order to truly be saved.
Time now for your Wednesday word, and today's word is patience. I say to you, don't give up, don't lose hope, be patient. God is working it out for you. His plan is perfect. Your patience in the process gives him room to work his perfect will in you and through you. So again, I say, don't give up, don't lose hope, be patient. That will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our programs online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, we're available on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, God bless. Thank you for watching.